Representative Tina Liebling, thank you so much for that introduction. You said it all. What this campaign is about is not just electing a president. Yeah, that's pretty important. But there's something that is more important. And as Tina just said, it is about transforming America. It is about thinking big and the kind of country we want to become. It is understanding something that the media will not tell you or talk about much, is that in the last 30 years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth. Problem is that redistribution has gone in the wrong direction. Yes, thank you, President Obama. We are better off today than we were 7 years ago, that's for sure. You know, it's amazing to me that our Republican friends suffer from a very, very serious illness, which seems to be all pervasive among Republicans, and that is short-term amnesia. How they could go forward with a straight face and talk about the problems we have today while ignoring what world Bush left us in when he left office. So we are going to make sure that our Republican friends do not forget that when President Bush left office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Unbelievable. Our deficit was a record-breaking $1.4 trillion. Oh, and by the way, the world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. Other than that, we were doing really good. So to hear Republicans talk about, you know, where we are today without putting it into that context is somewhat of an outrage. But here is another truth. Yes, we are better today than we were 7 years ago. But the reality is that for the last 30 years, under Republican leadership, under Democratic leadership, the middle class of this country has been shrinking, and almost all new income and wealth has been going to the top 1%. Now, the reason I think our campaign has been doing so well and why we're bringing out huge crowds, we just came from Texas. We had 10,000 people out in Austin. We had 8,000 people out in Dallas, and this is a pretty good turnout tonight. Thank you very much, Rochester. And the reason is that we're doing something very unusual. We're talking truth to the American people. And sometimes, you know, truth is not pleasant. You know, it's like you go to the doctor and you're not feeling well. Even if the news is bad, you got to know what's going on before you can get better. And that's kind of what it is with our country today. We have to face some very unpleasant truths. And let me give you a few. Number one, you are living under, as Tina mentioned, a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. I wish I could describe it in more pleasant terms, but I can't. When you have billionaires and Wall Street and corporate America pouring hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process, that is not democracy, that is oligarchy. And together, we are going to stop that oligarchy. You know what democracy is about, and I really do love democracy, is one person, one vote. It is you disagree with me, that's fine. You got a better idea than me, fight for it. That's a beautiful thing. But what democracy is not about is a handful of billionaires buying elections. And I'll tell you something else that democracy is not about. It is not about cowardly Republican governors trying to suppress the vote. You know, I've been in politics for a while. It has never occurred to me to figure out a way to make it harder for people to vote because they might be voting against me. So I say to those Republican governors and legislatures who are trying to make it harder for poor people or old people or people of color to vote, if you are afraid of participating in a free and fair election, get out of politics, get another job. Today in America, we have one of the lowest voter turnout rates. I want to see us revitalize American democracy. I want to see us have one of the highest voter turnout rates. And in my view, we're going to make this very simple. And we're going to tell the Republican governors, either through a constitutional amendment or through legislation, that if somebody is 18 years of age and a citizen of this country, they have the right to vote. End of discussion. Now, I think the reason that our campaign is doing so well across the country is that we are listening to the pain and the needs of ordinary people and not to the needs of billionaire campaign contributors. And that is a real difference. And when we listen to people, what we hear is people coming up to me and saying, Bernie, I can't make it on $9 or $10 an hour. That is a wage that I can't live on, and certainly my family cannot live on. Truth is that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. The truth is that millions of people in this country are working 40 or 50 hours a week, and they are still not earning enough money to take care of their families. Truth is that people working full-time sometimes end up at the emergency food shelf because they need food, despite their 40 or 50 hours of work to take care of their families. And that is why, in this country, together, we're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. Now, what this campaign is about, and it's not easy, is trying to force discussion on issues that Congress chooses not to talk about and media chooses not to talk about. Reality, but it's reality that is kind of swept under the rug. Let me give you another example of that. All over this country, in Minnesota, Vermont, all over this country, you have senior citizens and disabled veterans who are trying to get by on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. You know what? Nobody can get by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. And it's important for a moment, it is important for a moment to try to put ourselves into the life of somebody who is 80, 90 years of age, needs health care, needs prescription drugs, needs to keep their home warm in the winter, needs decent food, and they can't do it on $12,000 a year. Now, many Republicans are busy running all over this country. They want to cut Social Security. Well, I've got bad news for them. We are not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security. You know, you measure the greatness of a country not by the number of millionaires and billionaires it has, but by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. We will not turn our backs on our parents and our grandparents and on disabled veterans. We will stand with them. So we are listening to workers, we are listening to seniors, but we are also listening to young people. And what young people are telling me is, Bernie, why does it have to be that I end up $50,000, $100,000 in debt for what crime? Because I wanted to get a higher education? That makes no sense. So what this campaign is about is asking people to go beyond the status quo. Don't think small. Ask yourself a simple question. What kind of world do we live in? What kind of craziness exists when we are severely punishing millions of people for what crime? The crime of trying to get a good education. That is nuts, and we're going to change that. And this campaign is listening to women. And what the women are saying is, why does it happen that when we go to work and we're working alongside of some guy doing the same job, why are we getting 79 cents on the dollar compared to that guy? And the answer, in my view, is that what we are looking at is nothing more than old-fashioned sexism, and together we're going to change that. And this campaign is listening to the African American community. And they are asking, how does it happen in this country, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, how does it happen that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? China, 4 times our size, has fewer people in jail than we do. How does that happen? And the people in jail, as you know, are disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. So together, we are going to take on and fight institutional racism and a broken criminal justice system. We spend $80 billion a year of taxpayer money locking up fellow Americans. There are a lot better ways to spend money than locking up fellow Americans. And this campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the Latino community. And they are telling me that they are tired of being exploited, tired of living in the shadows, tired of seeing a family member being deported and families being separated. And what they want and what I want is comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. Now, this campaign is different than other campaigns in a whole lot of ways. It's not just that we have the most progressive agenda, but it's something more profound than that. It is me telling you what no other candidate for president will tell you, and that is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can make the changes this country desperately needs alone. Can't do it alone. No president, no matter how well-intentioned, no matter how hardworking he or she may be, no matter how smart, no president can take on the power of Wall Street, corporate America, corporate media, and these huge campaign contributors alone. And that is why, yeah, I'm going to be asking for your vote on Tuesday, but I need more than that from you. I need your help the day after the general election, because I can't do it alone. What the political revolution is about is revitalizing American democracy and making sure that every American understands that, yes, football is a spectator sport. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Every person in this room is extremely powerful if you choose to use your power. And what I will tell you, because I am in the United States Senate and see how things get done, there are people up there who have incredible wealth and power, and what they want is for Americans not to vote, not to be thinking about politics, not to get involved in the shaping of the future of America. What they want is low voter turnouts, low public consciousness, so that the lobbyists and the big money interests can control the future of this country. And our job is to take them on and to say that men and women fought and died for American democracy, and we are going to revitalize American democracy. We are going to have a government which represents all of us, not just a handful of campaign contributors. Now, I want to take a brief moment just to mention to you the differences on some key issues between Secretary Clinton and myself. Number one, maybe most importantly, when we began this campaign, we had to make a very important decision. And that decision was, do we have a super PAC or do we not have a super PAC? We concluded at the end of about 1 second that given the fact that we don't represent Wall Street, we don't represent the billionaire class, we will not have a super PAC. And here is what is absolutely extraordinary and something that I would not have believed I would be able to tell you 9-10 months ago. We have now in our campaign received over 4 million individual contributions. That is more contributions than any candidate in the history of this country up until this point. And do you know what that average contribution is? With such a brilliant audience here, there's no way we're going to lose Minnesota. I can see that. You are just too smart. I can see that. It is $27. And to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, this is a campaign of the people, by the people, and for the people, and I'm proud of that. Now, Secretary Clinton has chosen another path to raise money. She has several super PACs recently. One of her super PACs reported raising $25 million in a filing period, $15 million from Wall Street. Now, every candidate, Democrat or Republican, throughout history has always said, oh yes, I receive millions and millions of dollars from Wall Street, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry. Doesn't impact me. Doesn't impact me. They just give me that money for the fun of it. They just throw that money around, doesn't impact me. And then on top of that, Secretary Clinton, as you may know, gave some speeches to Goldman Sachs for $225,000 a speech. Now, I think if you get $225,000 for a speech, it must be a really excellent, wonderful speech. And therefore, you should be very proud to release the transcript of that speech. Clearly must have been an unforgettable speech. Share it with the people. Second issue. Everybody knows how important foreign policy is to our country, and the decisions we make are decisions of life and death. Back in 2002, the most important foreign policy debate in the modern history of this country took place. And the debate was over whether or not we listen to President Bush and Vice President Cheney and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld and go into war in Iraq. Now, I listened to those speeches that they gave and their remarks very, very thoroughly, because I, as other members of Congress, know that the decisions we make will impact in very real life and death ways young men and women in our states. I listened very, very carefully. I concluded that they were lying, and I voted against the war in Iraq. And it gives me, as the senator from a state which suffered very heavy casualties in that war, it gives me no pleasure to tell you that much of what I feared would happen if we invaded Iraq, in fact, did happen. Go to my website, berniesanders.com, look at what I said back in 2002, and my fear about the political vacuum and the instability that would be created. Secretary Clinton heard the same evidence, listened to the same speeches. She voted for the war. That's a real difference. When we talk about why the middle class is disappearing and why, for millions of Americans, real wages are going down, a lot of that has to do with our disastrous trade policies like NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China. Now, this is an issue the media doesn't talk about at all. You can hardly see any discussion of trade on television, just none, for pretty obvious reasons in terms of who owns the corporate media. But these are issues of huge consequence. And what this trade issue is about is not complicated. You don't have to have a PhD in economics to understand it. And what it's about is corporate America writing trade agreements which say, why do I have to pay workers in Minnesota or Vermont a good wage with good benefits, protect the environment, deal with unions, when I can shut down plants in the United States and move to low-wage countries, not worry about unions or the environments, and then I bring my product back into this country. That's all that is. And here's what's happened. Since 2001, we have lost almost 60,000 factories in this country and millions of decent-paying jobs. People who once worked in a factory, made a middle-class wage, had good benefits, are now flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. Now, I voted and helped lead the opposition against all of these trade agreements. I am helping to lead the opposition against the TPP. Secretary Clinton supported NAFTA, supported permanent normal trade relations with China. Now, when we talk about what's going on in this country and why there is so much angst and frustration, it has everything to do with the fact that in Minnesota, Vermont, all over this country, we got millions of people who are working not one job, they're working two jobs, they're working three jobs. And despite an explosion of technology and an increase in worker productivity, their wages are going down. So you got mom working, you got dad working, you got the kids working, you got marriages that are being stressed because people don't have time to spend together, kids not getting the attention they deserve. We have people, our country, people in America working the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. Do you all know that? Japanese are very hard workers. We work longer hours than do the Japanese. And at the end of all of that, 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. And then you got, that's income. And then in terms of wealth, you got the top 1/10 of 1% today owning almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. You got the 20 wealthiest people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom 150 million, half of America. This is a rigged economy. You know, heads they win, tails you lose. So together, you ready for a radical idea? Together, we are going to create an economy that works for working families, not just the 1%. When we talk about the economy, please understand that every month you see on the front pages of the paper statistics about unemployment. Official unemployment nationally is 5%. Anyone believe that? No. You're right. It's really, if you look at people who have given up looking for work and who are working part-time, real unemployment is close to 10%. And here is something else that we do not talk about at all. Media has nothing to say about it. And that is youth unemployment in this country. Kids who graduated high school between 17 and 20. If those kids are white, 33% are unemployed or underemployed. Latino, 36%. African American, 51%. And if anyone here thinks there is not a direct correlation between that outrageously high rate of youth unemployment and the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country, you would be missing an important point. So here's radical idea number 2. We are going to invest for our young people in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. And when real unemployment is almost 10%, and when we have an infrastructure which is collapsing in many parts of this country. I was in Flint, Michigan the other day. And let me just tell you, because I don't even want to talk about it, it's so horrific. It was hard for me to believe that I was listening to people who were living in the United States of America in the year 2016. When you hear what they were talking about, the poisoning of children because of a terrible, terrible water system, schools that are totally inadequate, healthcare system terribly inadequate, massive poverty in that city, you would think you're living in a fourth world country. You really would. But it's not just Flint. All over this country, we have water systems in trouble, wastewater plants, roads, bridges, rail system, airports, levees, and dams. We can create 13 million decent-paying jobs rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Think about America. Think about an America which has the best rail system in the world. Think about an America which has great public transportation, which has state-of-the-art water systems and wastewater plants, and which creates millions of jobs doing that. And when we look at our educational system, we should be hiring teachers, not firing teachers. And it is important again to think out of the box, think outside of the status quo. Every psychologist who studies the issue understands that the most important years for intellectual and emotional development are 0 through 4. That's a fact. And yet, all over this country, working parents are finding it very hard to get quality, affordable child care. You have child care workers who make wages lower than McDonald's wages, while they do some of the most important work in our society. We can create hundreds of thousands of jobs, good jobs, rebuilding our dysfunctional child care system. Now, Jane and I, you met Jane and I, have been married 27 years. We have four great kids and 7 beautiful grandchildren, and we believe in family values. But our family values are a little teeny bit different than Republican family values. And I want everybody here to understand what Republican family values are. What they mean when they talk about family values is that no woman in this room, in this state, in this country should have the right to control her own body. I disagree. What they mean is that the federal government should defund Planned Parenthood. I believe we should expand funding for Planned Parenthood. What they mean about family values is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to be married. I disagree. And when I talk about family values, what I talk about is the international embarrassment of the United States being one of the few countries in the world, not just major, but even poor countries, that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. Now, you tell me whether in America in the year 2016, a working class woman who has a baby today should be forced to separate herself from her baby and go back to work because she needs to bring income into her family. That is not a family value. What we need to do is pass legislation in Congress right now which guarantees 3 months of paid family and medical leave. And let me make a very simple, straightforward promise to you this evening, and that is, with Citizens United undermining American democracy, no justice to the Supreme Court that I will nominate will get that position unless he or she makes it crystal clear that they will vote to overturn Citizens United. And when we talk about the economy today, everybody here understands that we live in a competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. It is incomprehensible to me, and again, I ask you to think outside of the box, incomprehensible that hundreds of thousands of bright young people, qualified young people, who want to go to college are unable to do so because their families lack the money. That's pretty crazy stuff. And that is why I believe that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, it's not good enough to talk about first grade through 12th grade. We have got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Is this a radical idea? I don't think so. Germany does it, Scandinavia does it, countries all over the world do it. They are investing in their young people, investing in the future. Now, I am criticized for saying, well, I think this is an important step forward. I think we have to substantially reduce the burden of student debt. And then people say, well, that's, you want to make public colleges, universities tuition free, you want to lower student debt. It's an expensive proposition. It is, about $70 billion a year. How am I going to pay for it? We're going to pay for it by putting a tax on Wall Street speculation. This is what a rigged economy is about. When Wall Street's recklessness and greed and illegal behavior brought this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, Wall Street went begging to Congress and they said, bail us out, bail us out. Well, if Congress could bail out the crooks on Wall Street, then you know what? It's time for Wall Street now to help the middle class of this country. Let me say a word about Wall Street, because I think very few people recognize the incredible power that they have over our country. When I talk about a corrupt campaign finance system and a rigged economy and a broken criminal justice system, it all comes together in one brief story. Some of you may have read about a month ago that Goldman Sachs, one of the large financial institutions on Wall Street, agreed to a settlement with the U.S. government for $5 billion. $5 billion. Now, why did they reach that agreement? They reached that agreement because, of course, they were selling fraudulent and worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans. All right? So they reached the $5 billion settlement, point one. Point number two, Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs make huge contributions to candidates. So they put millions and millions of dollars into the political process to get candidates to be beholden to them. Point number three, the revolving door. You know what a revolving door is? People go from Wall Street to government, back to Wall Street. Last 25 years, Goldman Sachs itself has had 2 secretaries of the Treasury, as well as many other high-ranking government officials, work on government, go back to Wall Street. Point number 4, maybe the most painful of all to the American people. Some kid in Minnesota today, or Vermont, gets picked up for having marijuana, possessing marijuana. That kid gets a criminal record which stays with him for his entire life. But if you are an executive on Wall Street whose fraudulent behavior destroyed the lives of millions of people, you know what happens to you? No, wrong. You get a salary increase. And then if you are the head of Goldman Sachs, you come to Congress as a billionaire and you say to Congress, cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and give huge tax breaks to the wealthy. Together, we are going to bring justice back to a broken criminal justice system. And that means, you know, justice under the law is a profound statement, something deeply embedded in who we are as Americans. And what it means is if you're poor and you break the law, you're going to pay the price. If you're rich and you break the law, you are going to pay the price. That does not happen in America today. Together, we are going to bring justice back to the criminal justice system. I am a member of the Senate Committee on the Environment and the Senate Committee on Energy. I've talked to scientists all over this world. The debate is over. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already doing devastating harm in America and all over this world. We have a moral responsibility to future generations to stand up to the fossil fuel industry, to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, I have been criticized for saying that the United States should join every other major country on earth, the UK, France, Germany, Holland, Scandinavia, Canada, every major country on earth, in guaranteeing health care to all people as a right. As Tina pointed out, the Affordable Care Act has done a lot of good things, but we have got to go further. Today in America, 29 million people, zero health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and copayments, and we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. In fact, we're getting ripped off right and left by the pharmaceutical industry. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill the prescriptions their doctors write, which is pretty crazy. Meanwhile, on top of all of that, we end up paying far, far more per capita for health care than any other country on earth, which leads me to the conclusion that the way forward is a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, people can disagree with me all they want, but it is my view that health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. Now, we can do great things in America when we do not allow people like Donald Trump and some of his friends to divide us up. To divide us up and make attacks against Latinos, vicious attacks, or against Muslims, or against African Americans, or whatever. When we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Now, I look forward very much, boy, it would make me so happy, to have the opportunity to run against Donald Trump. Now, and the reason I would love to run against Trump, well, first thought, a lot of the national polls and state polls show us beating him pretty badly, and that's a good start. But the reason that I'd like to run against Trump is that we will defeat him because the American people do not agree with him, that we should give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to billionaire families like his. The American people do not believe or agree with Trump when he thinks we should not raise a $7.25 minimum wage. The American people do not agree with Donald Trump when he says in a Republican debate, if you can believe it, that wages in America are too high. I guess if you're a billionaire, maybe you think that wages in America are too high. I don't know. But my perception is that's not the case. Now, also, we know that Donald Trump is the greatest of everything, right? And among his many other attributes is he is a great scientist. And he has concluded that climate change is a hoax, and that it is a hoax created by the Chinese. Now, I was shocked to hear that, because I thought from Trump's perspective that it would have been a hoax created by Mexicans or the Muslims, but the Chinese kind of took me back a bit. All right, we will together defeat Donald Trump because the American... We will defeat him because the American people do not want a president who insults Mexicans, Muslims, women, African Americans, veterans, and basically anyone who does not look and sound like Donald Trump. We will win because togetherness, bringing people together, trumps divisiveness. We will defeat Trump because community trumps selfishness. And most significantly, and the deepest point that I can make, we will defeat Trump because love trumps hatred. Now, what the political revolution is about is bringing millions of people, many of whom have given up on the political process, working people who say, I'm not getting involved, it's all crap, I don't trust anybody, and young people who have never been involved in the political process. It's bringing people together by the millions to stand up and say something very simple. And that is that the government of this country belongs to all of us, not just a few. Now, what politics is about is not just wearing a pin or coming to a rally. It is more than that. It is getting deeply involved in the political process. Minnesota can play a profound and important role in moving this country forward toward a political revolution on Tuesday, just a few days from now. In Minnesota, we will win if the voter turnout is high. I have no doubt about that. We will not win if the voter turnout is low. Your job, and I ask you to do this, is to work as hard as you can to bring out as many people as you can on Tuesday. And if we do that, Minnesota will play a significant part in shaping American history. Thank you all very much.